Hello, welcome to today's Planning and Zoning Board meeting, Wednesday, August 19th, 2015. If anybody has any items that they want to speak to, please fill out a blue card prior to the consent agenda being read because that's going to be the next item. There's already 4A, 5B, and 7A pulled from the consent agenda. So if there's no other blue cards, then I am going to go ahead and read the consent agenda. First item is the 2A, approval of the minutes from the July 14th and July 15th study sessions and regular hearing. Next item is 3A, PZ 15562, which is Z1520 in District 6, the 6400 block of East Test Drive located west of Power Road and south of the Superstition Freeway. It's approximately 32 acres. This is site plan review and modification of an existing PAD overlay, and the staff recommendation is continuance till October 21st, 2015. Item 3B is zoning case Z15027, District 6, the 10,900 block of East Pecos Road on the north side, located east of the Signal Butte Road alignment on the north side of Pecos Road, approximately 4.5 acres. This is also a site modification, but a special use permit for fueling pumps also. And this is to be continued to the September 16th, 2015 meeting. Next item is 4B, zoning case Z15026 in District 5. The 7400 through 7600 blocks of East Southern Avenue on the north side, located at the northwest corner of Sossaman and Southern Avenue, approximately 11.57 acres, rezoned from LC PAD to RSL 2.5 PAD, and site plan review. This request will allow for the development of a single residence subdivision. This item is continuance till September 16, 2015. The next item is 5A, which is Southern and Sossaman. It's a preliminary plat in District 5 at the 7400 to 7600 blocks of East Southern Avenue. This is also continued to the September 16, 2015 meeting. Next is item 6A, which is to recommend proposed zoning ordinance amendments to section 11.72 regarding permitted land uses to allow banquet and conference centers in industrial and employment districts. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as read into the record.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please vote. Starting to work. Okay, it passes unanimous. Okay. The next item that we're going to discuss is 4A. This is zoning case Z1525 in District 2, the 1600 through 1900 blocks of South Val Vista Drive, located north of Baseline Road on the west side of Val Vista Drive, approximately 60 acres. Site plan modification and rezoning from LCBIZ-PAD to LCBIZ-PAD-CUP. This request allows for the addition of residential, retail, office, hotel, and theater buildings to the existing commercial center. And if we could have staff give us a quick little overview on this.
Chair, members of the board, this proposal adds several elements to the existing center, which is located at the US 60 and Val Vista Drive, including a hotel, 6-story hotel in the northeast corner, a mixed-use cluster of 2- and 3-story buildings, including retail, restaurant, and office uses in the north area of what is currently the parking field. In the northwest corner, a multi-level residential complex wrapping a parking structure, including what is proposed to be 325,200 square feet of residential units. And then also in the northwest corner, a movie theater proposed at approximately 40,000 square feet, and then an additional mixed-use cluster of retail restaurant buildings in the south area of the existing parking field. Also proposed are revisions to some of the drive aisles, the pedestrian, the sidewalks, getting more shade, getting parking closer to the buildings, and then modifications to the existing 1998 design guidelines for the center.
Is the applicant here that can give us a presentation on this site? Please state your name and address in the record.
My name is Jeff Brand from Nelson Partners, 15210 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 300, Scottsdale, Arizona.
Christine Mustandrea, Whitestone REIT. We're the owner of the shopping center and also out of Houston, so 2600 South Gessner Road.
Okay, great. Can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Yeah, Christine, you want to
Yeah, sure. Certainly. We had purchased the center a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, it was in a kind of a poor situation with a receivership with a bank and also the developer that had originally developed the site. The original intent had much more massing to it, and unfortunately, with the change in economic conditions, things were somewhat frozen. We had the opportunity to purchase this. It was in 2011, I think. Trying to remember, we bought a lot of properties in the market here since then. That being said, we've taken a real good look at what we feel is the changing economic conditions also with retail and what's happening in the virtual space that's going online with shopping and purchases, and recognize that in order to meet the neighborhood needs and also to create a destination and a place of that people want to be active, that there's substantial changes that we needed to make to the center. So we brought in then Nelson Partners, who you may be familiar with, has done quite a bit of work in the area. They've done Kierland, and we asked them to come in and take a look and say, how could you work with us in creating a dynamic community center that would reflect to the needs of the community? So if you'd like to introduce a little bit.
Yeah, so aside from kind of adding new buildings and some new uses to the site, there was an overall improvement of the pedestrian streetscape area. So we're adding shade, adding trees, renegotiating kind of the width of the drives and the sidewalks to actually make it meaningful, shaded, comfortable areas for pedestrians to walk up and down. Otherwise, the general layout of the shopping center is mostly an L-shaped strip center with a general large field of parking in the middle. So the goal was to try to create a more dynamic, a more successful, a more vibrant community area. So the methods that we use to do that are to enclose the streets. So we've added more buildings that actually provide for a two-sided streetscape in some areas, and then to also infuse additional uses, including restaurants and public space areas, office on the second floor, and the importance of a theater and a residential component. Because most of these projects, mixed-use projects that are kind of hitting the market, the ones that are successful for, I guess, for a Generation Y and future generations of people that are purchasing and buying, and their buying power is that people want to live and shop and play and work kind of all in the same area. And so we felt that an important cog in making this a lasting, successful property was to actually infuse residential on the backside of the parcel. So there was always residential planned on this parcel, and what they had done was, I think they had thought about 8 or 10 stories above some of the retail, and then a huge garage on the backside of the property that backed up to the residential. I think it was, I'm not sure how close, but it was against the back property line. It was 450 feet long. So what we did is we took that garage that was 4 stories on the back, and we wrapped it with residential that kind of zigzags in and out so that you get some relief in courtyards and landscape as it faces a single-family residential up there. So that's essentially that's the solution, as well as adding a hotel kind of on the Val Vista frontage as you get off the freeway. So we feel that those additions of program, as well as kind of the manipulation of the street front, will create a lasting, vibrant project. So that's kind of just how Kim had described it.
That's great. Thanks. Was there any questions of board members? We do have 2 blue cards. One of them says they wish to speak, and the other one doesn't say either way. Jay Samuels? Did you wish to speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if we could get these 2 comments, and then maybe you could follow up. Great. Please come up and state your name and address. And I think you have like 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Jay Samuel, 3330 East Impala Avenue in Mesa. I live over in Dana Ranch, which is right next to Dana Park. When we first moved in, it was great, and I think that the building has been great for the community. But I am concerned that they had mentioned now that there's residential units. I don't know how many residential units they're planning and how high the apartment buildings are going to be. Now I hear there's a hotel. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Up in
A
the
hotel
far
and a
corner by the
theater.
freeway.
Okay. So part of my concern is that community that we live in, we may lose some of not only the visibility, but the intrusion of people now being able to look into our subdivision to the people's backyards. My other concern would be is parking. I don't know how Dana Park has overnight parking, if it's allowable, and if not, I'm concerned that our side streets, because of the accessibility of where there is a park, can be used as the overflow, especially with the apartment buildings. Again, if I don't know how many units are being planned, and maybe they can address it, but when I look at and see 158 cars, you have to look at how many, are we planning on having less than one car per unit, and then what happens to the overflow of cars? So my concern will be, is it going to be allowed then permissible to be in Dana Park rather than Dana Ranch? And also to make sure that I'm looking at, when we first, I'm sorry, this is small, but there's a walkway, there's a green belt, so to speak. I want to make sure we're not losing more space, the privacy aspect from backyard neighbors in Dana Park to Dana Ranch, that we're not squeezing that and just putting tall trees in there to be a buffer. I think that's pretty much it. But the parking is my biggest concern. Is that there's going to be
Maintaining the park.
maintaining the park, but parking of vehicles.
Right.
If we're going to have enough adequate parking for the how many apartment units that are going to be there.
Right.
So if
And
we
you
have
don't want to
200
lose your buffer in the park.
well, not only that, if we have just hypothetically 270 units, and you only have 158 parking spots, you have to assume at least one unit's going to have a car. We already have a problem there. So you're not going to have adequate parking. What are they going to do with the overflow?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, the next card that I have, the only other one is David, is it Marchant?
No.
I got it right? Wow.
You got it right.
Whoa.
French origin. My name, can you hear me? Is David Marchant. I live at 1709 South Citrus Cove in Dana Ranch. My house is immediately on the site where I look out my back fence and I will see this building. It's like my house being back there on that wall. And according to what they showed, it looks like the building will be about like where this wall is here. And so we kind of sitting in our backyard saying, what's it going to be like to have a 4 or 5 story, I wish it was clear on the map, a thing right there looking into our property, or us not being able to see much, you know. So we're just concerned about that. We wish it was a little bit further. We have a green belt in there. I'm sure they're keeping that because that's legal, I understand, that when Dana Ranch gave them the green area to separate us from the park, that was to stay forever. So I assume that's going to be there. And so we were just wondering if how they're going to do it so that our view is not totally destroyed. And being a homeowner, I don't think I'll live there forever. I might, but I'm not planning on it, you know, eventually. But whoever takes over, you know, I may have to sell the home, and I don't want to have the value go down. So that's my concern about this whole thing.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Could the applicant come up and address some of those concerns and questions, please?
Certainly. And thank you. Certainly understand your concerns. And I think we had met early on when we talked with the HOA. Yeah, we understood that this would be an issue. And so I want to talk about 2 things. One is we instead of doing what was mandatory, we reached out to the HOA and let them know that we were proceeding with this and that there was going to be a change in plans. One thing I think that may be misunderstood here is that originally it was it's a garage with a high rise, so the density was much higher. And from real estate terms, there's a lot of value to that, and we're reducing it because we think that it would be much more marketable and much more upscale to do it appropriately for the location and where it's at, instead of having a tall building back there. So understanding that would be some of the concerns. Again, how we wanted to do this is we wanted to make sure that we modified this to mitigate having a direct view into people's homes, and therefore I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk about a little bit of the parking and some of the structure and how we designed that to mitigate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, first to address the parking. I'm not sure where the 158 number came from on the site plan, but I'll tell you just from working.
It's on your letter that you sent out to the community.
That was the 158 number that's on there is 158 cars per level of the garage. So the garage is actually the same amount of levels as the residential building is. It's 4 levels.
So we're parking.
So you park on each level that the residential piece is on. So if you're on the 4th floor of the residence, you would park on the 4th floor of the garage. But it's 158 cars per level as currently planned on the site plan. So I will tell you, as far as the planning for the apartment, the multifamily apartment complex, it will be planned to accommodate completely for by code for how it's outlined in the zoning ordinance from a parking requirement standpoint. I think that it's probably 1.1 or 1.2 cars per one bedroom, or I think it's 1.2 per studio, and then 1.5 for one bedroom, and then 1.7 for 2 bedrooms. So whatever the zoning ordinance, I don't think it does us any good to have a residential product that doesn't park itself for the patrons. So it'll absolutely park itself. And for the entire shopping center, we have done a pretty intensive study about the amount of parking that's needed. Right now, there's actually a very big overage of parking out there, and so what you see is just this kind of hot, empty asphalt parking lot most of the time, which I think is probably, from a property standpoint, it's kind of a detractive point of the property, is that you mostly just see an empty parking lot out there, and from a heat island effect, it's pretty, especially this time of year. But for the other comment, as far as the space between the backyard of the residential neighborhood, the entirety of that green belt is being maintained. It's actually a flowway. I believe it's a retention area that water actually makes its way down there. It's depressed down. The apartment building would be a minimum of 87 feet from the backyard wall of where you guys are to the closest point. And then it oscillates. It goes back. It goes out to 87 feet, and then it goes back to over 150 feet from the back wall. So it was intentionally designed so that you wouldn't have a full blank wall up to the point where the garage was before. It was intentionally designed to sort of zigzag in and out so that you could see into courtyards of landscape, so that it wasn't just a big wall of building. So we're looking at a high quality product here. So I'm hoping that it both increases your property value, because hopefully you'll be next to an incredibly successful environment for retail and for residential and work and stay. So I think we're all hoping that it increases the value of the property and the value of every property around it. And I think it's been done to mitigate the impact, visual impact on you guys as well. So that's all that we can say.
Question, does the center control the park, that greenway that we're talking about?
Yes, it was actually given back to the HOA and was then given back to us. So we found that, I think when we also talked with you all, there was a concern that people were parking to access the park on your area. And I would, quite frankly, we'd rather have people come through the retail to access the park, right? So one of the things that you'll look in the design is that we created more of a pull into the back there through the center. Right now it's actually detached. It's like a green patch in the back that has no flow from the entrance of the center whatsoever. So we think that there's a better way to connect that and make it useful through us instead of having them parked by you all. So, because that harms you and it doesn't help us. So.
You'll have to come up to the podium.
Well, I don't want to break protocol. I don't know what the process.
It's not a big crowd here. You can ask a quick question.
2 questions.
Sure.
One, will there be enough visitors parking for people that may have visitors?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Absolutely.
this is one of the things that you want with the center is that empty parking lots are actually not good for retail, because it doesn't.
For the residential.
Oh, yeah, so I'd rather.
Part of the required parking from zoning is actually
Okay, well, that was kind of like
the requirements are put in for visitors to allow parking.
And also making sure that drainage is proper for the rain.
Oh, absolutely.
Sir?
Yeah,
Sir.
I think we're going to have to come up here because that was just supposed to be one little quick question. Just real quick. Yeah.
Jay Samuel. So my only concern was to make sure that proper drainage for water, that as you're building, we're going to have that green belt. Right now, there's a lot of ground that absorbs the water. By creating concrete, we're just funneling more water into that possibility that our community can get flooded. We just want to I want to make sure of that, and also that there's visitors parking, which it sounds like you addressed.
Yeah, I think it's.
That friends can come over there and they're not going to be using our streets.
And what we want to avoid is there's a connecting street that goes here, and we're not activating that street. It just creates an inappropriate environment.
Okay,
So,
thank you. You're going to get me in trouble.
But to address the drainage comment, the volume of drainage that's required for the site won't be changing. So our civil engineer is on board, and it'll be an appropriate solution. So there won't be, I don't think there will be any danger. It'll be designed to withhold the drainage properly how it would have been.
And all that
in any
information
case.
has to be submitted to the city for approval anyways.
That goes through the city as well, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. It looks like we have another late speaker here that wishes to speak, so we'd like to hear from Dan Copeland. If you'd come up, please, and state your name and address, and have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Dan Copeland, and I've seen the proposals that...
And your address also, please, for
Pardon?
the record. Your address for the record,
excuse
please.
me, 1717 South Citrus Cove.
Thank you.
Here, right behind the AJ's parking lot and so forth. When I bought the home back in 99, I believe it was, 555 gave us a booklet, which got copies of what was in it, and it shows the backup behind Citrus Cove, and I'd be glad to give these to you guys. Basically, ground floor parking all the way across. That was back in 1999. And then in about 206, there was a proposal put forward to put in about a 4-story parking garage, backing it all the way up against the green belt, so the people on Citrus Cove would be looking at like a penitentiary wall. And the council, as I recall, voted to pass it. One of the members of the council abstained because at that point he said that he didn't know enough about it. The whole thing sort of got shoved through. None of the people on Citrus Cove were notified as to what was going on. Then the crash came, everything sort of sat, and nothing has happened since then. Now these people have come up with a new plan, again, to push a 4-story building up against a green belt. So the people on Citrus Cove are going to, again, be kind of blocked out of the sky. So I'd like to oppose the thing, or get the people to move the 4-story building farther into the structure, into the area, so that, and from what I understand about Mesa, generally they don't support putting the tallest structure in a project like this against the very back end of the project, especially when it's up against residential homes. That's my objective to the deal.
Thank you.
And I can leave these with you, or
Excuse me?
could I leave these
Did
with
anyone
you?
need that? No, I think we probably have a good idea what was going on in 1999.
Okay,
We're good.
all right.
Okay, if we could have staff
Thank you.
follow up too, and could you also give us a little summary of the neighborhood notification that was done on this project?
Yes, Chair, members of the board. The applicant, so there are 2 parts of the neighborhood notification. 2 weeks before the meeting, the applicant was required to provide us letters that would be mailed out to people 500 feet away, and so that was done. The site was to be posted as well. But before that, they were required to do citizen participation, which included mailings out to property owners 1,000 feet away, and then homeowners associations and registered neighborhoods beyond that. This applicant chose to set up 2 separate sets of meetings, so they scheduled 2 meetings with the neighbors from this neighborhood directly behind the center, and then they set up 2 separate meetings with neighbors from the rest of the surrounding area out to 1,000 feet. So they did include in their report, and I've included that in the staff report, the questions and concerns that were raised in those meetings, and then their responses to them.
Okay, great, thanks. Does the board members have any questions or comments?
I have a question for the developer, a couple of them actually. That parkway, I believe you have control of that, the green belt to the west of the, right next to your property, is that correct?
Oh, can you please come up to the podium? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
The reason why I'm asking that, that northwest corner, the way, first of all, I want to compliment you on trying to do something on that, because that is a challenge, especially in that corner. But along with that, you're putting a lot of intensity in that northwest corner. You're not only talking about the apartments, but also putting possibly a theater there. Is that correct?
Yes.
In that corner. And the reason why I'm asking about, I've asked this question before about the park there, because I'm wondering if there's an emergency that comes up and you have so much intensity in that northwest corner, you know, how will emergency vehicles get in there? And if they cannot get in there in the future, will some of that park be taken away to make access to the backside?
So I'll let Jeff address this from a technical perspective, but we're substantially downsizing the rezoning for this, so it was thought with much more intensity to it before. So I think what we're doing is actually opening up access for emergency vehicles. So,
As far as emergency access, I think on the northern edge of there will be a roadway access on the northwest. I guess there's actually an access drive across the backside of the commercial portion before you get to the residential. So there will be appropriate. There's no intention to do away with the greenbelt or the park in any way to service an emergency drive. I think that would devalue the multifamily property. So the goal would be to have that be lush and green. So any emergency access would, I think, to get it past the fire department, we would have to, whenever that submittal comes forth, we would have to have the appropriate access for hose lengths and for truck access, turning radii, all that kind of stuff. The plan would have to accommodate for all that for fire and emergency and rescue to be able to operate appropriately in that area. So
I know that the city of Mesa, if I'm not mistaken, they didn't have a concern. Is that correct, staff, about the fire or police?
That is correct. That's correct.
we made slight adjustments to the building to accommodate it early on because it was brought up, so we addressed it. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? We ready to take a look at this and make a motion? No.
Oh.
4A.
Well, give me a second one.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve item number 4A, Z115-0225, with the staff recommendation of approval with conditions.
I second that motion.
Let's all vote. I have no idea because I've got a site plan on my screen. Oh, it's up there. Great. It's unanimous. Thanks for the heads up. That's approved.
Now you're up here, by the way, if you want to watch yourself.
Oh, great. Thanks. Okay, the next item is actually two items. It's 5B, which is the 54th Street Business Park in District 2, the 5300 block of East Main Street in the south side, located east of Higley Road on the south side of Main Street, approximately 4.5 acres. This request will allow for the development of a commercial center. It also has an accompanying case 7A, which is Z15028. So if we would like to, I'd like to get a little summary real quick from the staff, please, on this.
Sure, Madam Chairman, members of the board. This is a request for site plan review located at the 5300 block of East Main Street. This site specifically in general is located just east of Higley Road on the south side of Main Street. The current zoning on the site is for general commercial. The applicant is proposing a site plan which shows 9 buildings on 10 proposed lots for service-oriented commercial businesses. The lot is laid out from east to west with a shared drive aisle. Each of these businesses The services each have bay doors with shop space, as you'd see in auto-oriented type businesses. Each of these businesses have, well, not each of them, 9 of them have secure rear yards. Each of them has a construction type that includes shipping containers and cement tilt concrete slabs. This site's been to the design review board. The applicant's going through some revisions to the elevations themselves to come up with a way of having those two building material types mesh better. As we look at the site and the context of the site, it's on East Main Street. This is the old highway corridor. The general plan for this area of Main Street is designated for the neighborhood character. There is also a transit corridor identified on all of East Main Street out to Power Road. So as we look at the general plan and the character of the general plan is envisioning that in the future, if the transit corridor were to be approved out to the Power Road, we would be applying that transit district. The way it sits now, let me go back to the way the general plan discusses that. As you get into the transit district in Chapter 7 of the general plan, it states that any proposed corridor that hasn't been planned yet for the improvements is to retain the character type that's underlying that corridor. So we can't apply the forms and guidelines of the transit corridor. With that said, it is a proposed corridor for possible light rail expansion. So as we look at this site, we look at it in context of the current zoning. It's got general commercial zoning on the site. The proposed uses that the applicant is proposing are all allowed within his zoning category. So when we look at the site layout itself, how does the site layout lay in context with the surrounding neighborhoods, the surrounding context with Main Street? And what are some of those things that we can do knowing that there's a possibility that this will be a transit corridor in the future? And so as we laid this out with the applicant, we concentrated on that landscaping and the streetscape across the frontage. We had them bring the office portion forward for the farthest west lot. We've tried various variations that could possibly bring some of those other buildings closer to the street. As we do that, the identified need of the applicant for those secure rear yards becomes problematic with circulation. So as we tried to apply as best we could for something that could possibly happen in the future. As we look at the general plan itself, the general plan talks about context, redevelopment of areas, infill development. This site's been vacant for decades. I don't know that there was ever any development on the site. I know the highway department, I believe, used it for some storage of their materials as they improved the highway over time. Hasn't been used for that for years. So to encourage development on the site consistent with its zoning, we've worked with the applicant to come up with this general plan. Some of the other issues, another issue that was identified at the design review stage was the two buildings on the farthest east of the property have smaller bay doors that face out onto Main Street. The zoning code would require those to be screened up to a height of 6 feet with a 50% opaqueness. We worked with the applicant on developing a berming and landscaping to help shield those. We've also discussed on alternative building designs for those roll-up doors to give it more of a unique look. We're still in the process of updating those elevations through design review. He's scheduled to go back to the design review board in September, and we're hoping to get those revised elevations back to them. With that being said, we are recommending approval with conditions. There are three non-standard conditions, and these have to do with those rear storage areas. A concern of staff's is that if visibility back into those rear areas, not storage areas, sorry, secured parking areas, visibility is important to detour any outdoor storage that may occur on the site or may be tempted to occur on the site. Therefore, we've made it clear that outdoor storage is prohibited in those areas. We've stipulated that those gates will remain open during business hours as they're there for parking purposes. And we're stipulating that the gates themselves and walls are designed in a way that allows visibility into the site. With that, we're recommending approval.
Okay, thank you. Now, is the applicant here also? Would you like to make a presentation on this? Or give us an idea of what you're planning out there? Please state your name and address.
My name is Corey Smith. My address is 1952 North, 39th Street here in Mesa.
And then tell us a little bit about your project.
Well, it's I thought Tom did a pretty good job describing it. It's a property that's in a pretty distressed area. I did some research, found that there's only been 2 buildings in the last 15 years built within 1,200 feet of that property. There's some structures and stuff that are in the neighborhood that aren't very desirable, and we think that our project is a definite bonus to the area and bringing in some development and hopefully some taxes for the city as well. We think that we build normally we build tilt concrete buildings with concrete roof panels as well, so our buildings are very strong, very fire resistant and protective. With this project, we are introducing the usage of storage containers and trying to inject that into it and bring a little bit of a difference, get a little bit different look and help spice it up instead of just the concrete panels, which we're kind of, especially the office out front, we think that that'll look really, there's probably no pictures here of it, but it's actually pretty interesting, and that's why we kind of really got it out on the street so catch people's eyes as they go by and then ask about it. And it's actually a sales office for that type of construction, whether it be office or maybe a unit to go up in the mountains or a cabin or something like that. They have a lot of flexibility in being able to use those. So that's basically what our project is.
Okay, thank you. Board members, you have any questions of the applicant? Of the applicant? Any? Okay, great. I guess we may have some questions of the staff you have?
No, just part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we?
And my only comments, and I want to put that out there, that I'm going to have a hard time supporting this project, and for several different reasons. One is I realize that it's a proposed transit-oriented corridor with a neighborhood character area development, and to me those are walkable, more pedestrian friendly, more of a group type of commercial. And as I look at these, and I know they're allowed use, so I'm not I guess against, I shouldn't say not against the uses, but I think there's more appropriate uses on that site, but most of them are automotive related. And if this is a proposed transit corridor, I think that the design of the layout of the site plan could maybe accommodate more of a pedestrian friendly environment. I also, another one of my concerns is the secured parking areas, because I do think that if there's, 9 of them, I think, is that what you said, right? 9 of them, and those have the potential of being outdoor storage. I know that that's not allowed, and we will basically state that in the code. But over time, and I'm thinking 10, 15, 20 years down the road, I just think that maybe now's the time that we need to look at putting something in place and having that more of a, I guess, being more long-term, planning it out long-term, that it needs to be more of a designated transit corridor rather than a proposed transit corridor. So I don't know, I know, John, that would have to do with your staff doing something like that, but I'm thinking now is the time that we need to start looking further out for something like that. But for those reasons, I won't be able to support this project.
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Right now, Tom, the project is zoned correctly for what they're requesting, right?
Correct. The zoning for the site has general commercial, and general commercial allows these types of uses.
Okay, and there's no reason to take a look down the road and say there's going to maybe something proposed in the future that this may not be consistent with, or is that appropriate?
Well, the question is whether or not it conforms with the general plan. And so as we look at the general plan, what is envisioned down Main Street, the light rail corridor is approved to Gilbert Road today. The answer to whether it extends past Gilbert Road or turns and goes down Gilbert Road hasn't been answered yet. So the general plan identifies it through the transportation plan, is where it's referring to, that it's a proposed corridor. So the corridor itself, as it's laid out, is designating something that could be envisioned for the future. So as we're looking at current development, what we're left with is what is the current underlying character area for that part of Main Street. Right now, that's the neighborhood character designator. And as we look at that as it's related to the context of the zoning on the site and the surrounding zoning, the site is surrounded on the east and the west side by a mini storage and RV and boat storage lot. To the immediate, at the west and the south. The east is a vacant lot also. Uses up and down Main Street on this side all kind of harken back to the old highway frontage. Over time, we do envision seeing a possible corridor down there that would be more transit oriented. With the zoning in place, that's what we were left with. Those and the design standards for that zoning. The forms and guidelines in the general plan that we would follow are for those neighborhood type plans. How does it relate to the context? So it's in conformance with the general plan in that sense. As we look to the future, we looked at some of the forms and guidelines and what we could possibly do within the context of how it exists today. And we incorporated what we could. There are things that would be more appropriate for transit than this. For areas of this, it's just like with West Main, Central Main, we have sub-area plans there that pull out policies, programs, guidelines that would help us guide towards that vision. Right now, there is no sub-area plan on East Main Street. In the future, I could see if that East Main corridor were approved to expand for that transit, that we would put into place some type of sub-area plan that would call out something that would deal with these types of zoning. GC zoning, the land uses allowed within it aren't very compatible with the transit corridor. They allow the car dealerships, they allow the large vehicle sales and service, they allow the heavier types of auto body work and mechanic shops. So in the future, those things are things that we need to be looking at as a city. But for right now, the zoning is in place for these types of uses with the set design standards.
Okay, great. Any other questions from board members? Mr. Akita?
I'll just make a comment that I understand the board members' concern about the future, but I think I'm going to be in support of this because, if we're talking about 10, 15 years down the line, we don't know what's going to happen. And I think the applicant here is using the zoning, which is appropriate. Staff is recommending it. And again, whether or not light rail goes all the way to Power, because as the staff, Tom, has mentioned, it could turn south. And again, 10, 15 years from now, if it doesn't develop at all, then we have a piece of ground that never got developed. And we have plenty of those in the city. So again, I think I'm going to be in support of this case and with staff.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we...
And you can couple them together, too, 5B and 7A.
Oh, 5B and... Oh, okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we approve item number 5B, Corey Smith's application for the development of the commercial center as written in case number Z15-028 in District 2, along with the associated conditions of approval.
So this would be a motion to what?
Approve.
Okay, approve. And it's going to be the 54th Street Business Park, District 2, and the Z15028, District 2, correct?
That's correct.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Let's vote. It is 4 ayes and 1 nay, with Alan voting no. And that should be all of our cases today, correct? Mm-hmm. But I need a motion to adjourn, correct, Mr. Wesley? May I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn this meeting.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Let's vote.
Maybe we won't.
You're not going to.
Aye, yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, staff, for all your hard work.